It is now 5 p.m. on Monday, December the 7th, 2020. I now call to order the policy committee meeting of the Belton Independent School Board of Trustees. I am the only trustee here physically. Chris Floor is joining us via Zoom. Dr. Smith is also present, along with various members of his administrative staff. Where's Elizabeth? Oh.
Elizabeth is no longer here.
Okay. And anyone sign up for any public comments? Becca, do you know?
No, sir.
No?
Connie.
All right, Connie. All right, let's go down to item 3, view and discuss the following items. EIC local, learning study. I guess Deanna, you're up?
Yes, Deanna's going to be talking for us today on Zoom about EIC local, and so just a reminder for our policy committee, this is a follow-up. So EIC is a policy that we addressed in the spring of last year, and we had some discussion at that time and had some board members that said that this is something we should continue to look at and continue to talk through. So when it says EIC local learning and study, Deanna is introducing this topic today to really dive in. This is not a first reading or a second reading. This is for us to get a sense of what do we like about EIC and what are we struggling with EIC. So Deanna, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Everybody can hear okay? Okay, great. So just like Dr. Smith said, Matt said, we really wanted to talk about the purpose of EIC, take a little dive into what our policy currently states and how we're operating under that policy, and then I have 4 different policies from other districts that approach things a little different, and I just kind of want to show you those so that everyone has an understanding of what could be done and the conversations we might have around this. So to remember, we're first looking at EIC for Belton, and the purpose of this policy is to discuss class rank. It's to identify how we rank our students for graduation purposes. And a couple things I just want to point out is reminders in our purpose and our policy. We rank all of our students, and that's going to become important as I start to talk about other students. So we rank from the first in the class until the last spot. We also identify in this policy the courses that are included in our ranking. And so you can see in the calculation piece, we talk about what courses are in play. A reminder, this policy was revised in 2018, and our first graduating class under the current policy is the class of 2022. So those will be next year's seniors, this year's current juniors. When we talk about our ranking of our classes, I want to point out that we identified that we would have 4 levels of courses under this policy. Level 4 being our English AP, those would be weighted the highest. Then on level 3, we would choose to rate on-ramp, dual credit, and our pre-AP courses. Then we have our on-level courses, and then our level 1 is our skills-based courses. We use EIC exhibit, and I'll show that in a minute, just to where those courses all fall and how we rank. Further down in this policy, we still have our class for 2021, which was on the point system. And then we identify on page 4 our local graduation honors. So that's pretty common in a policy. Who will be our Val, and who will be our Sal, and who will be our Summa, Magna, and Laude honors. Our policy is a little different from others in that we do address New Tech. So New Tech is not a standalone campus. As you recall, New Tech is it as a program as part of Belton High School. So we address specifically in this policy how we will handle their valedictorian and salutatorian, and that is found on page 5. Then following this policy on page 7 of the PDF is our EIC exhibit. So it has the 4 levels like I mentioned. Note in our policy, we rank every single grade. So we distinguish between a 100, a 96, a 95. We have a specific point value for that. And I point those things out because now as I start to talk through some other policies and what's available, you're gonna see some differences, and I want to show you those. Before I move off our policy, are there questions that you have currently around our policy? Before we start looking at some others.
Deanna, it's Matt, if you could, can you just elaborate a little bit? You said this was, we had a revision of this in 2018. What work did y'all do in 2018 on this policy?
So, we held a committee to discuss how we wanted to, address this policy. We currently had some complications and calculations of a policy. We had a point system, so rather than having a level or a tier, we added points to a specific class. And we wanted to review what was included in the policy. So it had been a long time since the policy had been reviewed by committee. And we wanted to evaluate how we might handle the different courses and their calculations, AP, dual credit, class rank. We had a committee consisting of teachers from all areas, and we studied other policies. This all came with the timing of knowing we would need to address the policy immediately for Belton New Tech. So at that point in time, we knew Lake Belton High School was coming on board. We knew that Belton New Tech was going to be considered a program as part of Belton High School, but would not be their own campus, and we knew we needed to address how we would handle graduation, val, and sal. And so that committee got through how we would weight courses. We modeled a lot after Northwest ISD. They've made some changes since we did that work, and I'm going to show you those tonight. But then the determination for val and sal really came after that committee work and a discussion with students from the top 10 representing both of those classes. Does that help, or are there any other questions? It's really hard to see faces, so just knowing if you can help me out. If you have, I can't read any body language. I can see you, but if you have any questions, let me know.
What if I wave at you like
I
this?
think Manuel does, yes, we'll wait you down.
Okay, yes, I can see that now.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Deanna, when you were talking about New Tech and Belton High School on page 3 of the packet, right there in the middle, you said the class of 2021, about the grades and all that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you look at page 4, the bottom of page 4 of the packet, the Valedictorian, Salutatorian, that's not going to change in 2021, or is it going to change?
It will not change. The calculation of grades from adding points to the 4-tiered system begins with the class of 2022. The recognition of the val and sal as part of having Belton New Tech be a part of Belton High School begins with the class of 2021. And so that had to be noted in the policy. Typically, when you make changes to this policy, you don't want to change anything midstream. For students, you typically begin with that first freshman class. But so, for instance, if we were changing the policy tonight, which we're not, but if we were, you typically consider not making those changes until the first freshman class following that change year. In this case, that group were already freshmen when we knew we had to make a decision about how we would handle val and sal for Belton High School and Belton New Tech. As the policy's written right now, that will not change unless there's a proposal to change it. And it certainly could be.
So there will continue to be a valedictorian for New Tech and Belton High School even in 2022, or did I misunderstand?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is, as the policy is written now, that will be our practice until that policy is changed.
Okay, that's all the question I had about that.
Absolutely. Okay, so what I want to do is now that I've kind of refreshed everyone on how our policy works, I just want to show you some other policies. So this is a local policy, and it's really one of the ones that you can see a different version for every district that you look at, because it speaks to how that district chooses to rank their students and what messages they send with GPA, class rank, and where they place kids. So I pulled a sampling of policies to just show you some different things that from some high-performing districts. So I first want to start with Friendswood. The biggest change I want to point out in Friendswood is that they choose to only rank the top 10% of their students. By law, we're required to, as a district, to rank the top 10%. In Belton, we rank all students, but in Friendswood, they choose to rank only the top 10%. That, and we can certainly discuss, pros and cons. I certainly want to answer any questions you have around that. But that they are choosing to do that as a way to find other measures for students to be using rather than just class rank in terms of college acceptance and scholarships. Another thing that's different in Friendswood from ours, when you scroll down on their weighting, how they weight their classes. So this is on page 10 in the packet. Friendswood ranks on a grade span. So any grade from a 95 to 100 is weighted the same, rather than breaking down by each point. So if you think about kids vying for positions and we have many students focus on every single numerical grade. Was it a 98? Was it a 99? In the Friendswood policy, they rank the same by a 5-point span. They have 3 levels, AP, pre-AP dual credit, and then regular courses. And those are the kind of the big changes on their policy compared to ours. They still have the similar things in ours I didn't go over because they're pretty standard in terms of local graduations and breaking ties, highest ranking graduate, things like that. They also rank their valedictorian. They do not have a situation like we have with Belton High School and UTEC, so they just clearly state who will be in the Val and South. Any questions around that? Or discussion or thoughts?
What is the biggest, what's the most significant pro and con between what Friendswood does and what we do?
I think the most significant is not ranking all students. And to see how that's working, we really want to have some further conversations with them. So tonight's just kind of an overall things we could explore, but just sending that message that we'll rank what we're required to by law, but then we will we'll look at other factors to support for college, and we'll force colleges to look at other things. And then also, I would say that average, that span, that grade span is an interesting concept to treat, and from a 95 to 100. I think there'd be pros to that, there'd be cons. There'd be kids that would not think that's fair. I got a 100, you got a 95, how do we get the same? There would also be, but a pro would be it might eliminate some of the competition and stress between vying for looking at every single point from a student perspective.
What about applying for scholarships and admission to colleges? If a certain college looks at if you're in the top 15%, so you would never know if you're in the top 15. If you're not in the top 10, you wouldn't know where you are.
That is correct. That is correct. But that would force a college to look at other measures, and I think in their system they are looking at other measures. They're looking at assessments. They're looking at course loads. They're looking, and they have done work to find that it is not harmful for their students, but in fact it's been beneficial.
Matt, have you had any experience with that? Anybody in here, have you had any experience with using that system?
Yeah, and when I was a high school principal in Arizona, we had a different ranking system, and being really frank, every system I've been a part of does class rank or in GPA calculations very different. For me, it comes down to what do we really value in our system and what do we want for our kids. And so that's the whole purpose that I think opening up this conversation will lead us to eventually, is getting down to, do we equally value a dual credit class in our system with an AP level class? Why or why not? And if so, do our policies, like ranking kids and sorting kids, do they help promote that? And I think those are the things that worry me a little bit on some of these things, is that we tend to get, with the more you rank and sort, the more it becomes a game where people play a game to be ranked and sorted because they want that position rather than wanting to take the class. And so I'll let Deanna speak to it, but my gut tells me that we have students who sign up and take an AP class, not because it's the program of study that they want when they leave high school, but because it inflates their GPA by completing that class. And so they do that to inflate their GPA and to gain whatever rank that they are pursuing, rather than actually pursuing the learning that they want. And I think that's the concern that I have.
And I'll echo that concern. That does happen. We also, we had some conversations when our committee met. There was some push to have our CTE. There were some teachers that really wanted to see CTE courses calculated in our class ranks. But then when we really further talked through that, I had to reiterate that a student on an AP track that's really focused on a high GPA is not going to take a CTE course if it's put in their rank and it's an on-level course. And so we didn't put that in because we want kids to take courses that are of interest to them, that are allowing them to pursue their potential future career, and to not be so driven by this class ranking system. Many of our kids will go out of Texas, and that may not even be class rank, may not have been the biggest factor in where they want to go. But it is, in Texas, just to be real clear, it's an automatic admission at UT and Texas A&M. And so those two campuses, are where I believe some of this roots from in terms of ranking. I can start, if it's okay, we can look at Klein, and I can start to point out some things there as well on page 12. So Klein, they rank the top 10% of their students. They also clearly state they're balanced out. They do something a little different in their policy. So they use EIC only for class rank purposes, and they choose to talk about how they calculate GPA in their EIE policy, which is a little different from any other districts I looked at. So we are going to look at their EIE as well. Most districts put their information in EIC. They do have this relative position only, which is something I did not see in other policies as well. It just has to do with kids that are entering into a class midstream, so they have this kind of safety net in there so that those students can be ranked, but it won't change the entire system's ranking until the next official ranking piece. They have 3 levels as well for their ranking, and they rank all AP, IB, pre-AP, and dual credit courses as honors classes. So when you get to their EIE, you'll find that they rank those the same, and they use and they rank as we do with each numerical grade. So they do, like where Friendswood did the span, they did not. But they have 3 levels. Their AP, dual credit, and pre-AP are all weighted the same, whereas our AP is rated higher than our dual credit. So when Matt talks about, as a child, how are they choosing courses, this might eliminate you making a choice between an AP versus a dual credit and truly choosing what you feel is best for yourself and not making a decision based on how the class is rated or ranked. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Then any questions on Klein? Okay, we'll go on to Northwest. So Northwest, this is the policy that we actually used when we were, we reviewed multiple policies at the time when we were reviewing, but this was the one that we landed on as a committee that we liked and modeled our current policy after.
Deanna, can I interrupt real quick? Can you just tell us
Oh, absolutely.
what page number of the packet you're referencing right now? So that
I'm sorry, yes, I apologize. We're now on page 20.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So, Northwest has recently updated their policy since we used it, and the change that they have made from best I can tell is that they now, they do not weight their dual credit at all. They, when I talked with them in 2008, they were discussing that at the time. They use multiple colleges, that may not be correct. They were using multiple colleges, and so they were looking into that because sometimes it is hard to get a grade in. And I apologize, that's not this one. They have, they do still include theirs, but there was discussion about whether or not they would, and that's coming up. I apologize. For Northwest, they have 4 levels, just as we do. They moved their dual credit. That's what it is. They moved their dual credit from a 3 to a 4. So similar to Klein, if you'll look on page 22, that's the easiest way to see this. Their level 4 ranking shows AP, dual credit, and on-ramp all on a level 4. In comparison to Belton, our dual credit and on-ramps are level 3. We modeled after them, and you can see we followed what they were doing as well, which is they continue to rank every numerical number with a distinctive rate. They do have the 4 levels, whereas the last 2 policies only have 3. That level 4 allows for clean ranking with skills-based courses. And that works, that's needed when you are ranking all your students from the first to the last position. Then I will go through the final Carrollton Farmers branch. Got ahead of myself for a second. They do not rank their dual credit courses. So in Carrollton Farmers branch, they do rank, as best I can tell, all students. So they don't, they rank they start off with they use a multiplier, and they also rank you through the third 9 weeks. So they have a different cutoff period than we do. When they rank their classes, they have 4 levels as well. They rank AP higher than pre-AP, and then they have on-level courses and modified. If you'll look on page 25, which is where their breakdown is, so you can see their grade point chart, you'll see their 4 levels. They have a grade span similar to Friendswood, only they have a 10-point span instead of a 5. What this says is that for every grade between a 90 and 100, you would receive the same GPA point system that you would, so rather than ours where we distinguish per point. So kind of taking all that in, I feel like a little bit of a kind of quick. What are thoughts or questions that you have as you've seen those things and wondering if you have about these different districts?
Is she gone?
I don't know, you're on this screen.
Deanna, just so you know, we lost the video with y'all. There we go, we got it back. We heard you but couldn't see you for a second, so
Oh, okay.
now we see y'all back.
Chris, you're taking up the whole screen.
I think for me, Deanna, I think I want to open it up to Chris and Manuel a little bit to talk a little bit about any thoughts or concerns maybe they've had with EIC policy in the past. And then we can do a little more research and, you know, dig up additional policies. But this was just to open the conversation about this policy, because this is a really tricky one, because it involves kids and parents and GPAs and calculations, and it's one that you want to get right, because just as Belton ISD has done in the past, when, in order to make changes to anything like that, you have to phase it in, and you have to do so in a manner that doesn't harm kids. And so this is a part of a long-term discussion from my point of view, and we wanted to just open it up to you all to get a sense of, you know, what were the things that were on your mind in the past, and what can we do to research and provide some information for y'all?
You know, go ahead, Chris.
Here we go, unmuted, all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've probably read this policy over a million times. And what I keep coming back to is something that Matt hit on earlier. You know, what do we want to do when it comes to AP dual credit non-ramp, right? And what is the outcome of that? How are the outcomes of those different? And should we be treating those any differently? You know, just without having the background, right? When I look at this, my gut is like, well, why isn't level 4 AP dual credit non-ramps, and then level 3 is pre-AP, and then level 2 and level 1, right? Just, if we were to keep a 4-tier system, again, I don't know if that's the right thing.
Right.
But when I look at it, you know, if the outcome of AP dual credit non-ramps is both, for all of those is that they get college credit for it, why aren't they the same? And so why would we try to limit or shoehorn kids into certain paths to manipulate their GPA? You know, if the class they need to take is an on-ramps class, and that's the only way it's given, or the dual credit class, and it's the only way that's given, you know, should we encourage them to take that class and figure it out in high school before they get to college, right? And waste somebody's money down an educational path that's not worth it, right? I don't know, right? So that's one of the challenges I have looking at this is, you know, are we weighting the right things? Are we rating similar things the same way, right? And then I also have a little bit of heartburn over sort of valedictorian and salutatorian between Belton High School and New Tech High School. And I just said something that's pretty controversial. You know, if it is in fact one school, right, from an administrative standpoint, in the eyes of the state, if there's legitimately only one valedictorian and salutatorian that can be identified, why do we name 4 of those kids, right? 2 vals and 2 sals, when 2 of them aren't that in the eyes of the state, right? It just, you know, I think of that down the road, like if somebody put valedictorian on their resume, does it mean valedictorian? Like from an employer standpoint, right? If I look at it, and honestly, like in a background check, if they had it on there, I don't know if they ever, you know, go back and look at that, but like, what would that show if you weren't the real valedictorian and it had a valedictorian on the resume? I don't know. So, you know, I've got questions around it. I know the work that was, I know there's a lot of work around the val and sal, and this was happening just as I was coming to the board. Like, I think I came in May of 2018. I think this was maybe like June or July of 2018. So I walked into it not having any kind of background. But then just, you know, sitting back and thinking about it over the last 2 years, like it doesn't feel quite right. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm not quite over the hump as to how it makes sense, especially if I start to wear like employer hats and things like that. And then when it comes to the weighting, geez, I guess where I went to school, I think 90 to 100, you got a 4, you know, it was a 4, right? I mean, it was all the same. It's a whole new world to me, kind of to see us do it this way, and so I would rely on the group as to, you know, what the benefits and counterpoints are to, you changing the grade point system. I'm probably less inclined to change the grade point system or to look at the grade point system than I am to look at, are we weighting the same things equally?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Those are my thoughts kind of ripping through this. The one thing I didn't see though going through this, and I can't find which policy it was in. There was a policy about like how the grades are actually calculated, and it lays out some differences between Belton High School and New Tech. And it wasn't EIE, because I did a quick scan of EIE on my other screen here. It wasn't there. I have to get back through my notes and find it, but that's another one too. Maybe on the list for the future, I would want to look at that one too.
It's in our handbook, and I'll look to see where it is in policy, but are you talking about like minimum versus major grade, minor versus major grades, and then percentages for New Tech?
Yeah, I think when it comes, it might have been. I mean, I feel like we looked at it in this committee like 2, 3, 4 months ago, right? It was relatively recently. It might have been the handbook, I guess, but it's all in the spirit of, when you see a grade of X, does it mean the same thing for everybody, right? It's just about consistency. And if there was some inconsistency there, yeah, I don't know. Maybe because it's a different policy and that's not on the agenda, maybe we can't talk about that. I don't know.
But we can, if that's something for us to research, we can research and, find what you're talking about and provide that for our next discussion. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the same spirit though, right? It's the same spirit as the AP dual credit on-ramp conversation.
And just for clarity, so everyone does know how it works, so I wanted to mean something. AP courses, you receive college credit for the course if you get a 3 to a 5 and the college or university determines whether or not they will give you the credit. With a dual credit course, you receive the credit upon passing the course, and the courses that we offer are universally accepted across all Texas universities that are public, not private, but public. And then on ramp, you take the course, and if you meet the criteria from UT for passing the course and college credit, you instantly earn credit. So a dual credit and an on-ramp course are not dependent on the success of an exam. AP is. And so just I want to make sure everybody knows that difference. You probably already did, but I like to clarify it just as work, because you're right. We do want to think about what is that sending for our students, and are they choosing the best path for them and their needs.
Well, and I also want to think about, right, do we even offer courses at some of these levels in some of the programs, right? I'm sure there's some educational program that we have, that maybe doesn't have an AP class, right? But maybe there's a dual credit class.
You're correct. Those are often found in our CTE. We've been trying to build our CTE courses, and so like an ENT or dual credit, there would not be a AP course aligned with that. You're absolutely correct.
Matt, going back to Chris, is there anything else that you had?
No. I mean, I think that's pretty major.
Yeah.
My first exposure to this EIC was whenever we had the discussion back in the spring. Before that, I don't think that it came up any. I think it came up for Chris another time, but when I wasn't on the board. But some of the things you mentioned, Chris, you kind of mentioned them in passing when we've had some meetings. When we had the meeting about the pass-fail, some of the comments that you're making now, you made them then. And we kind of said, well, we need to discuss, that's a whole different discussion. And then it's kind of come up in passing when we talked about this journey of a graduate. So as Deanna was talking, I don't think that you can not think of the journey of a graduate without thinking about these things and what we're gonna do. So I don't know if we're putting the cart before the horse, my first one's gonna be Wednesday. I know Chris has been to some to the meetings, but my first meeting with the group is gonna be Wednesday and then one in January. But some of the things that are a concern for Chris are a concern for me, you know, the very first thing is pretty obvious. You know, there's level 3 and level 4. You know, why is a dual credit not an AP course? Why is that not weighed the same? And secondly, why are we even discussing this? Why are we even looking at different school districts? Why are we even discussing it? Is our system broke? I don't know if it is or not. You know, what is everyone's thoughts on that? I mean, why are we even looking at that? Or do we necessarily have to look at it because it's incidental to this journey, you know, journey of a graduate, you know, process that we're on now? And like you said, man, it's gonna be a long-term process.
Yeah, from my take on it, I don't think anything in Belton ISD is broken.
No.
I think there have been
I
systems.
mean, that was rhetorical. I don't think it is either.
I
So
think
why
there
look
have
at
been
it?
systems for a long time that are in place, and I think it's good, especially with the role of the trustees in this committee. The trustees live in the governance world when it comes to school districts, and that means the policy level. And so periodically, with these most controversial policies or most of the policies that have the biggest implications on students, I think it's wise for us to examine, is the policy achieving what the board would want it to achieve? And so I think the whole reason we're bringing these and to open this discussion and saying it's not gonna close for a while. We're gonna have to study various things and dive into it in a different way that I think the policy committee may have done in the past. And the reason being is, should the journey of a graduate impact this? In my opinion, yes, I definitely think so. But I also think there's a discussion that the board will need to engage in, and we're gonna have it as part of our workshop at the upcoming board meeting. And that's around the values and beliefs of the Board of Trustees. What do we value? Do we value a well-rounded education in Belton ISD where students have CTE courses and AP courses and they're pursuing a path of their choice? Or do we value AP courses more than others? And whether we like it or not, policy dictates sometimes what we value based on what we've adopted. And I think that's why you see such discrepancies amongst policies across the state of Texas when it comes to this. And I think that it's good for us to examine that and feel out whether or not this represents you and your values as a board of trustees in representing our community. Are there things I like about our policy? Yes. And are there things that worry me about it? Yes, absolutely. I don't like the fact that kids are pushed into playing games with GPAs. I just think that's not, I don't think high school was ever intended for that, in my opinion. And I don't like to perpetuate that. I'd like kids to be able to explore and find a pathway that is their choice for the future, and for us to educate them at the deepest levels possible so that they can get into a good school. And I in jest give my A&M friends and my UT friends a hard time often, but there are a lot of good schools that are beyond those two systems. And right here in our backyard in the state of Texas, and I think of Mary Hardin Baylor right next door to us, and I think of Baylor right up the road, and I think of all these schools that our kids have options to go to. And do we sometimes use A&M and UT as the end-all be-all in some of these things? I believe we do, and I think we should examine some of these and figure out, does this reflect the values of the board? Is it good for kids? And is it promoting what we really want in that journey of a graduate?
You know, if I were valedictorian material in high school, and I looked at this system, but I wanted to get a well-rounded education, I don't know that I'd be able to. Because my goal would be to be valedictorian, because I'm gonna get an automatic scholarship somewhere at some big school.
That's right.
A great school, but at the same time though, I also want to have a well-rounded education, but I'm not gonna be able to do that. So I think that if you can do both, man, that's a pretty good system.
That's right. That's right.
So it seems to me when I was reading these things and you know, when Deanna pulled the stuff from Carrollton, from Friendswood and all that, I'm thinking, man, that's pretty neat, the way they do things. It's a different way of looking at things. But then I started asking myself, well, why do that? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But I think that with that point about if I'm valedictorian material, but I also want to get a well-rounded education. How do we accomplish that?
That's right. And I think that's a great question for us to start, and we can investigate questions like that more. And to Chris's point about, the integration of new tech into some of this, we can investigate how other districts have done that, whether it's in the state or out of state, right? I don't think, Deanna, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there are a lot of examples that we have of new tech in the state of Texas that has it as part of a program of a comprehensive high school like BHS, is that right?
That's correct. I tried to find them. I'd asked TASB at the time when we adopted it, and we were on our own with that type of system. I also just researched, again, new tech schools in the state of Texas, and the ones that I researched are their own campus. So they're like, Capel has one, Manor has one. They all are standalone campuses. They're not combined with their mainstream high school. The other thing I just want to add, and really echo kind of what Matt's saying, is just having been a high school principal, having lots of conversations with kids about what they plan to do in the future. When you advise a student for what to take course-wise that meets their best interests, you follow their hopes and dreams. And so there are times that I would recommend an AP course to a student based on what they plan to major. There would be times I would say, no, actually for you a dual credit would be a better option depending on where you want to go. There's so many factors in it. For a lot of kids pursuing the bioscience, leaving high school with an associate's degree would be definitely something kids want to pursue. But I always had to be mindful of the current policy. And if I tell a student, sure, let's go ahead and pursue that dream to have an associate's degree in high school, they will artificially be ranked lower than a student who doesn't take dual credit and takes all AP. Now, could they still end up at the top? Well, sure, mathematically, it all depends on what grades you get, but they'll never have the opportunity to perform as high as the top performing AP student by the way the policy ranks. And so that's where I think we're challenged to look at our policy and see is that the message we want to send.
Deanna, do you have the same concern that I echoed that Chris talked about in terms of this level 3 and level 4, for example, dual credit and AP being two different levels, 1, 3, 1, and 4?
Yes, I do. If you're asking my personal professional opinion,
yes.
I think it's something we should explore because, like you both said, I mean, there's, like we've all said in this room, there's so many, we want students to pursue what's best for them, and that's depending on where they want to go to college, what they want to major in, what our course offerings are. And we want them, if we want them to follow their dreams, then we want to advise based on the best interest of them and right now our counselors must be highly aware of what that would do to class rank.
Matt, when we talked about Chris's point about, and we can go back to this thing we're talking about now with this ranking, with these levels. But this thing with New Tech, where we have it's not a standalone campus, it's part of Belton High School. If you were to take the valedictorian of New Tech, do we know where that person would be ranked at Belton High School? I mean,
Absolutely, I think absolutely, Indiana, correct me if I'm wrong, we could obviously rank and see where the highest achieving student, according to GPA at New Tech, falls in with Belton High School, and sometimes it might be higher, sometimes it might be lower. I think we definitely have the ability to see those things in our system because of the way our bookkeeping goes.
So we've been reporting that to students all along since we put this policy in place. So we were telling students as we rank, we were reporting two rankings. We were reporting their standalone ranking and then what we were calling a merged ranking. At this point in time, our next ranking will be in January, following the end of the, actually maybe February. It's 10 to 15 days after the end of the semester. That will be a single ranking. We will no longer have a separate. So we rank the classes one, then we will name the valedictorian as the highest ranking student. If that student is at New Tech, then the first BHF student to be the valedictorian would be named for their campus, or vice versa, just depending on where they fall. So when that policy was put in play, the trend had shown that it would have been usually the fourth or fifth person in the class became the valedictorian of Belton New Tech.
But you know, we're somewhat inconsistent in the way we do things. You know, the graduations, how we do graduations, I mean, if it was just one campus, then why don't we just do
On graduation.
one graduation? You know, we treat it in a lot of respects like it is its own standalone campus. When I wasn't on the board, I thought it was. You know, that was the impression I got of just being a member of the community.
So it was, just for clarification purposes, it has been a standalone campus until this year.
This year,
And
okay.
just for clarification purposes, that decision was made because the students at Belton New Tech participate in extracurricular activities. And if the campus remained a standalone campus, those students would need to participate in extracurricular activities at either Belton High or Lake Belton High School, depending on where they live. And because of the transportation, the time factor it would take to transport students from New Tech to Lake Belton High School, the decision was made that New Tech would become a program off of Belton High School.
So for
So
me,
this is the first year that is in place.
So a lot of logistical issues that we have.
logistical issues and policy issues, and so then what we did was we solved it with policy, right? We had logistical challenges on all of that, and we solved it with some policy decisions. And then I think we have to ask ourselves, is that what we want for our kids long-term? I'll use this as an example. I value options for kids. I believe that we do comprehensive high schools really, really well in Belton ISD. And comprehensive high schools meet the needs of a large majority of kids. But I think there are some kids, like at New Tech High School, that don't fit into the comprehensive high school box. And I think, I imagine that we also have kids that don't fit into that box at New Tech or at Belton High School or at Lake Belton High School. So I personally value options for kids because I think it's our job to educate them right where they are and help them prepare for their future. But that isn't an articulated value that the Board of Trustees has said, or that the team of 8 that we all have said that we value that. So I think values and policies need to line up. Do the policies represent the values of the Board of Trustees? And so this discussion that we need to get into about what beliefs and values the board has, I think directly impacts policies. And then our challenge will be is to say, if we really value options in our school district, and we also value students being, having separate campuses, how do we pull logistics off for all of that, right? Because then it's a logistics challenge that we can figure out. So I think all of these things are wound together, and I think this is why this policy, it's a good one for us to start with, is so complex and touches so many pieces of a student experience that if the board has concerns about what the policy says and what it does, then we dive into really studying what we want it to do for the future based on your values, and we go from there.
I don't know that we have any choice, man. I think we need to dive into it because of this thing we're doing with the journey of a graduate. I don't think we have any choice. Chris, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to go on record as saying I do not want to tear down New Tech.
No.
So,
Right.
like, I just wanted to say that for the record.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Well,
it is
yeah,
about
I agree with
options
that.
because everything Matt just said. Like, I think there's some kids where just the educational environment, like, they would do better, absorb more, learn more in that environment than they might in the BHS or LBHS environment, right? And the argument for not having it as a standalone and attaching it to BHS is then those kids also have the opportunity to play on the athletics team, right? Which is a door that we would slam shut, at least, potentially, if it was by itself, right? So I want to keep as many doors open from an options and opportunity standpoint as we possibly can. And again, that goes back to, at least the policy at hand, AP versus dual credit versus on-ramps. I want to kick as many doors open and keep those doors open for as long as we possibly can for all these kids. And so that's why I feel like it's important to look at it. And I do think it's going to get framed by the journey of the graduate, right? It's going to be informed by that. Okay, great. What do we care about?
Yeah.
Okay, we will have studied it for weeks and months, and that's when the hard work really began. So,
That's right.
'cause then we have to bring it to life, and we're good. Like, we will probably have this conversation again, I'm sure, as part of that. I don't know. I still, you were talking to Val and Sal, again, to get back to that, so you could end up in a situation where if you line up all of the BHS and New Tech kids together, student number 1 is BHS, student number 2 is New Tech. And so student number 2 would be your salutatorian, right? But they're also your valedictorian, right? In the way we have the policy written today, like it's just, I don't know. Again, I know, I understand the environment was different at the time that we did it, and what we were doing was really tough, and we had a lot of challenges to get past. So understanding that, I understand how we got here. I just, once we get through the journey, I think we look at it again, squint at it again, and say, does that make sense for the future? And because we're not going to propose any policy change out of today, but I don't know. That's where my head is on this whole thing.
So Manuel and Chris, I have a few notes down to do some research, and we can bring this back at another meeting, and those notes are as follows: to do some research on New Tech and Belton High School, and to see if there are other systems out there, it sounds like out of state, that we could see how people have set this up. Is anybody else set it up as a program to be included with a comprehensive high school like Belton High School has? And if so, what are their policies around GPA, et cetera? So we can expand our search there. I have a follow-up on that idea of minor and major grades, or the search for additional policy implications that Chris mentioned earlier. Deanna referenced it could be in the handbook and stuff, so we'll do a little digging and just see if we can find what we're looking for there and see what might need to be discussed. And then trying to dive into the idea of well-rounded students and achieving scholarships. So maybe it's diving into some districts' data and being able to see, are there any districts that have this policy really rocking it, that their kids are able to take a plethora of classes and able to expand their horizons in those classes, but also done so in a way that really recognizes the high achieving students and allows them to get college admittance and scholarships. So those are the 3 things that I had as follow-ups. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and looking at these other districts, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if we do a top 10%, and we only rank those kids, what's happening to them when they leave high school? I mean, what's happening to them when they apply to schools? Is it affecting their ability to get into certain schools? Is it affecting their ability to get certain scholarships? Because if I'm ranked number 11, in the top 11%, what's going to happen to me? I mean, I can't get automatic admission into Texas or Texas A&M because I'm not in the top. What is it now, Deanna? Top 8%?
7 to 8. I'd have to go back and see exactly where it is.
It changes year to year, doesn't it? To some extent.
It changes. It has changed several times. Yes.
Okay.
I'll give Deanna some credit too. Their team is diving into a data set and exploring how we get our hands on it. And it's about National Student Clearinghouse, and it's about where students go after they leave us in Belton ISD. And so that data set, I think, should help us have this discussion too, because we'll know, what percentage of students are from Belton ISD are going to 2- and 4-year schools, and what are going, what percent are pursuing career options right after high school. And I think that type of data is useful for informing these things as well.
And we're in conversations, and we can expand those conversations with other districts. We wanted to hear from you all first and your thoughts before we start to see there are other districts now that are not ranking all students, and so that's not a new concept. There are districts that have been doing it now for a couple years, and they're seeing the success of it for students, so we can certainly explore that.
And you guys probably hear from parents more than we do, and from students and concerns that they have. We want to know from the administrative staff, you, Matt, and everyone else, Deanna and all the principals that she works with, we want to know what students are saying and what they're wanting.
Yeah.
And that's a.
But I want to take that one step further, and like, I want to go to UT, I want to go to A&M, I want to go to Baylor, I want to go to Texas State. I want to talk to their admissions folks, right, and understand, well, what is it that you're looking for? Because we've got to have that input, I think, into it too. Again, it's all in the spirit of trying to kick the door open and leave it open as long as possible, right? Like, if changing the way that we rank or limiting what we rank closes doors, well, that doesn't seem intuitive to me.
At some point, if we're gonna vote to do some things, at some point, we have to be as well informed as we possibly can.
That's right.
Like Chris, that point that Chris mentioned, we could have a valedictorian at Belton High School and number 2's here at New Tech, and also the number 1. Obviously that would be an easy policy change, but you can draft policies to address just about anything if you want to. If they're written well enough. So I don't.
Yeah, it's an easy policy change, but it's a really tough execution.
Right.
And because we've got 2 separate graduations.
Right.
And so now you potentially have a graduation that has no valedictorian, right? And so, there's nothing you do about it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That would be a weird policy. Well, in the event it's number 2,
That's
this
right.
person's number 2. Yeah, that would be
Right.
that would be a difficult one to have to handle.
Yeah. But to pick on, New Tech again for a second, I think the reason why I kind of keep going back to the differences between the two is, I want to make sure we understand and can kind of sniff out where the really great stuff is happening, right? If there's something that's really great that's happening at New Tech, I know there's lots of great stuff that's happening there. If it's really great happening at New Tech, well, would it also be really great if we took some of that and implemented that at Belton High School and Lake Belton High School in some capacity, and vice versa, right? Is there something happening at LBHS or BHS that maybe we ought to integrate into New Tech, right? That's kind of the spirit of, looking at it and the comparison.
Sounds great. We'll do some digging and we'll open this discussion up again and go from there. And we appreciate Deanna in spearheading this and y'all in engaging in some thoughtful dialogue around it.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you. I wish I was with you. This is hard to maneuver. Thank you.
All right, so we're now, go to 3B, and Mike, you can talk to us about naming facilities?
Yes, sir.
Well, as you know, does anyone need a paper copy before we get started? I think everyone may have it, it's really good. So we started this discussion back in October, and at that time, we brought to you our version, or our current CW local, which was adopted in 1983. And we also brought probably 12 or 14 examples of CW locals from around the state, some from fast growth districts, trying to just find different ideas. And so we took the feedback that we received from our October meeting, took some feedback that we've had through discussions with our administrative team, and also branching out and looking at more policies, and kind of trying to come back with something to discuss tonight that's in the spirit of what came out of that October meeting. So once again, this is not a proposal or a first reading. It's a draft for discussion. We would like to kind of pick apart these different ideas, kind of get your thoughts on it, see if we think there's anything missing, and then as we be able to come back later, after the Christmas break, in a future meeting with the policy that we would like to take forward, moving forward. So, I'll kind of give you the general overview. Listening to you guys, obviously the first two sections, guidelines and definitions, some of the better policies that I felt like just kind of set up the purpose of the policy and defined what school facilities they're actually talking about. So in this case, it could be a school campus building, a room or area within a school building, a structure related to a school building, athletic fields and facilities, or any other building or adjacent land area that's property of the district. So that's pretty broad, but it does kind of define what district facilities might be considered for renaming at some point. Listening to the comments from the October meeting, I think everyone kind of was in agreement. They wanted a clean nomination process, but one that also could kind of meet the varying needs. You know, the naming of a comprehensive high school might be different than the naming of an athletic facility or a baseball field. So, kind of came up with kind of the best of both worlds, felt like on this, and so I'll kind of just brief on nominations, and then we could have a discussion. So we're saying that anyone in the community can make a nomination. So if someone had a name to be considered, they would need to be able to identify the facility and provide clear explanations of why the name should be honored. And they could include supplemental materials such as news clippings, letters of recommendation, other printed resources. The nomination could be made by letter, or if we decide to go this route, we could come up with a district form available online where someone would make that nomination, and the nomination could be submitted by mail or email to the board member or directly to the board facilities committee for consideration. Then it talks about the board facilities committee, and superintendent would determine if a selection committee would be needed for that particular name. Is this something that the facilities committee would like to make a recommendation and then the board act on it? Or is it something that we would need to bring in other stakeholders and have a greater discussion? And so I think that it's important that you not have to have a committee every time you name, unless that's the direction we want to go. But at the same time, you always have that as an option if the board facilities committee and the superintendent decide that a committee would be necessary. And then I think probably some of the better policies I saw designated for any time that you're naming a new district campus, that you would always want to have a selection committee for that. So with that being a big component, I guess I'd like to just open up for discussion, questions, comments, dialogue on the nomination process, if this makes sense to everyone.
Mike, can I add one thing real quick?
Sure.
Daniel? One of the things I remember Rosie saying loud and clear too is that we want the policy to be able to still allow us to give Belton ISD the Belton ISD feel. And some of the districts that we mentioned in the other policies and stuff are big, fast-growing districts, and but one of the things that Rosie indicated that we value in all of this was the real hometown Belton Big Red community feel to all of this. And so I applaud Mike on trying to create a policy that also allows us to have a system in place for naming these facilities, but also to do it in a way that it isn't too large and complex and takes away some of the personalization that everybody values.
Mike, on page 28 of the packet, next to the last paragraph, the last line says the committee may or may not contain board members at the discretion of the district facilities committee. The district facilities committee is the same thing as the board facilities committee, right? Or is that a different?
No, it should be the same thing. So, yes.
So that should be board facilities committee?
Yes.
Correct. Now, in reading this thing, the way that I see the process is that a member of the community can either contact the board member, contact superintendent, or contact the district, the facilities committee, which would be kind of the same thing.
Yes, right.
and say, I want to name this facility this name, and then go to the process, either use the form that can be drafted at a later time, and then provide the information why they believe this person or this name should apply to this facility. And it could end right there, then the board could look at it and then agree to vote on it and vote on it. On the other hand, if it's a campus that's gonna be named, then you gotta go to the selection committee. Gotta have a selection committee, created that would then provide names, right,
Yes.
for the facility. Now, one question, if I'm a member of the community and I say, I wanna name this campus here XYZ, then, who's gonna vote on it? Does the selection committee vote on that?
To rename a campus?
Yeah.
Would that be the situation? The nomination would have to be made, and then I think the way we would set up is there's enough flexibility that the facilities committee and superintendent can determine if a selection committee would be needed. But if we say that naming of a district campus would always require a selection committee, then the facilities committee and superintendent would determine the members of that selection committee would be.
Right.
And I saw some that were so specific that it would say a certain percentage have to be from residents, a certain percentage students, and I felt like the feeling that I got after the feedback from October was we want to have a little flexibility in how we build that out each time. That the board and the SUIT, as they work through that process, could kind of make sure that the right stakeholders are involved. Tried to come up with something that was flexible enough that a committee can be assembled if needed. If not, it can just be a recommendation comes from the facilities committee to the overall board, and the overall board can take action on that renaming if they chose to.
Okay. Now, if you have a person that says, I'd like to have this campus named after this person, or whatever name they want to select. And then there's a selection committee that's established. The selection committee, according to this, then submits 2 or 3 names to the board for consideration. Would that include the name that the person submitted?
Yes. And I think that's a good question, because it may be getting blurred here between, to me, the situation, a brand new school that has no name versus, the renaming of Tiger Field, or if that's one that comes up through this process, or the naming of a baseball or softball field after a certain coach or a certain player. So that may need to be the distinction made in here. I think in my mind, the bringing back of 2 or 3 names and then letting the board pick the one that choose the silent, to me, is more of a campus naming process. We may want to designate, if it's a non-campus entity, that one name can be nominated and considered by the board for final approval. So would that make more sense to everyone to do it that way?
If a person comes in and says, I want to rename Tiger Field, Morgan Field.
Right.
Okay, and then there's a selection, even though it's not a campus, okay, so then it goes to the selection committee. Committee's established, goes to selection committee, but then the selection committee picks their own 2 or 3 names.
Yeah,
So what happens, that person gets lost in the shuffle.
yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, I think it's a good question for us to examine.
I mean, I'm just thinking about this procedurally.
Oh, yeah. Does there need to be a guarantee that the nomination that triggered the whole assembling of a committee and a naming
Right.
process
But then-
have to be included as one of the options in the
Right,
proposal?
because then the person that's submitting that is submitting it for naught.
Right.
Sure,
I mean, it means nothing
yeah,
there.
no, that's a great, that'll be something we can clean up in this.
I don't know, that's a potentially dangerous path, though. I don't know that you would want to guarantee that a particular name comes forward. I don't know, like, if it's the name of a person, right, and, you find, while they may have done lots of great things, maybe they also did some not so great things. And those not so great things make it so that we don't want to name a campus after them or a facility after them. Like, I don't know.
In my mind, in that case, though, because we do ask, as part of the nomination process, they be able to provide a clear, concise explanation why the name should be honored. And if they're in the researching of that, it is, I mean, in all cases, there could just be chosen, and we would take no action to move forward with that nomination too. Just because someone makes a nomination, we can go through the process of renaming. For instance, like he said, if someone wanted to rename Tiger Field Morgan Field, obviously that would be a terrible idea. So we wouldn't even move
I think it has a
forward
nice
with
ring
that
to it, I don't know
process.
what you're talking about.
So I think that's a great point, and some of the districts put criteria for renaming, that if it was a person, it has to be a person with a good reputation, that it made positive contributions to the community. But I felt like a lot of that stuff was kind of subjective anyway, and that if we just had a process where, as we vetted through the nomination process, we don't bring that nomination forward. But yeah, there is a danger of, as Manuel said too, if someone makes a nomination, you assemble a committee, and then the committee comes up with different recommendations than the original nomination was made. That could become a pretty political animal at some point too, as well, I think. So.
Yeah.
That's funny though, those are great questions that I had not seen addressed in any of the other policies I looked through though, other than just having a thing about it being a moral person in good community standing that made positive contributions type deal.
I didn't see anything else in that other than I wanted the procedure to be pretty clear. You know, when we have a selection committee, then the person that initiates the process, that they just don't get thrown to the side.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I also don't want to open the floodgates to, hey, like we get nominations to rename every facility we have in the district right now.
Right.
So, yeah.
That was the other concern. So if you put this on the website, I mean, there could be just a flood of requests. So I think there needs to be a process in place where those things can just, you know, there needs to be an ability by someone within our system to, you know, it just dies on the vine.
Mhm. And I think there were some policies, if I'm not mistaken, Mike, you can correct me, I think there were some policies that clearly articulate that the Board of Trustees has ultimate authority in naming all facilities, right? And so, with the renaming one, I think is the real interesting one. I can't imagine that, you know, moving forward, that we would hamstring our community and say, this is the only way we're gonna name a brand new building moving forward. But I do, see is longtime educators or, people who made significant contributions to the local area, as they pass away or things like that, I could see very specific requests coming up, and we need to be able to authentically, you know, have a policy for our community that addresses that. So there's some good things we can kind of.
And we do have, on page 29, it does say the board will have final approval in the naming or renaming of new and existing district-owned facilities. So, recommendation of a committee, recommendation of the facilities committee, are just that, recommendations. It would take action of the board in open session on an action item to rename anything.
Yeah, because ultimately there's a financial impact of any renaming
That's right.
decision.
That's absolutely right.
And sometimes a large financial impact depending on what we've just renamed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was talking about initiating the process. I mean, the board does have the final approval of naming or renaming, but what about just, does that include if somebody, if a person comes in and says, I want to rename New Tech?
Well, and I think that's where Mike was getting with the facilities committee, the board facilities committee. There could be some authorities that facilities committee has that says, we're gonna move this forward or we're not, right? And study it more. And then the whole board has the ultimate authority to say whether or not it's something that we would approve.
I think we need to add that in there.
That was kind of my vision too, that, I mean, it's kind of like a piece of legislation. If it dies in committee,
Right,
it dies in committee, it never
Right.
goes to the full
Right.
board,
right,
so.
right.
Okay.
The other thing that was kind of, as I browsed through the other policies, and this was something that someone mentioned in the October meeting too, is setting a timeline I like the idea of a 12-month, naming a new facility 12 months before the opening of the school. Do y'all feel like that's too far out? It does kind of give everyone lots and lots of time to plan and brand and do all of those sorts of things. So, and it also eliminates that referring to, for a long time, like Charter Oak was referred to as the Poison Oak site, until we finally decided on a name. So kind of just looking at some of the policies and some of the more well-done policies, I saw consistently 12 months seemed to be a pretty consistent timeline, but it's obviously could be adjusted to 10 or 9 or 8 or 6 or whatever y'all feel like would be appropriate on that.
I mean, I like that there was a time horizon. I don't know what the right time horizon is. The thought was, the longer it is, I don't know. I can't say one way or the other on 12 months. It seems reasonable to me. What are we likely to build next? We're probably likely to build an elementary school, right? So, how much time does it take to build an elementary school? And if you work backwards, is 12 months enough time?
I could check with some of our architect friends on that too and see if there's an industry standard that they've seen.
We could make it to where we say unless the board chooses a different time.
It's recommended.
Yeah, recommended time frame.
Yeah.
There you go, done.
Done. I like it. Good job,
Were
baby.
y'all okay with the discussion on mascots and school colors, basically saying the superintendent will determine that process, who the stakeholders will be, seek input from the board, but the superintendent will come forward with recommendations for mascots and school colors?
I think it makes it easy. I thought.
I don't know. Do you want to take the bullet for that one?
I'm smiling underneath this mask right now. I'll respectfully decline to say anything more.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense to me. Is it something that I wanna, is it a little worrisome? Yeah, but I think it is, it's part of the job sometimes, so I'm okay.
Yeah. As long as the next high school also has primary color red.
I appreciate you just calling that out, Chris. That's great.
Well, that's some great feedback. I think we'll be able to come back with with some clarity, research this a little bit more, and hopefully get a little bit closer to a version that we can settle on. We can have TASB look at and maybe come back with a final draft later this spring.
Come back with a first reading, I guess. All right, that sounds good.
Great. Thank you for that discussion. Thank you, Mike. Mike's done a great job diving into that one.
Yeah, it's a sensitive one.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
I think it's really important. Like Rosie's comment last meeting really resonated with me, or when we talked about it. I think it is important that if our board and community are interested in naming a facility after somebody's given their life to the school district, then we got to figure out a way to do that. And I think that's important. So.
Okay, Matt, we're going to item 3C, other policies addressing graduate profile.
Okay.
Dr. Golden got that one.
Okay, so in your packet, provided you with 3 policies that are really our foundational policies for decision-making. We have BQ Local, which is a broad planning and decision-making policy. BQA talks about decision-making and planning at the district level, and then BQB at the campus level. And so I'm not bringing you suggested change in policy, really wanted to just open up the conversation around the journey of a graduate and the implications we think it should or should not have for the decision-making process, whether we're talking at the district level or the campus level. And so I really just wanted to start a conversation on what role do we think the journey of a graduate, once adopted, should play in our planning and decision-making as a district and individual campuses. So I'm just opening up to some initial thoughts.
Ask that question again.
So what role should the journey of a graduate play, once adopted, in informing our planning and decision-making processes, both at the district level and campus level?
a loaded question. Right, I mean, to some extent, the journey of a graduate who comes out of that is going to help us set the goalposts for where we want to be going, right? But in all honesty, like, that goalpost is going to be somewhat generic, right? I mean, it's not generic, but it's non-specific, right? I mean, you know, there's going to be high-level core values or core things that we want to come out, but there's going to be a lot of room around how do we interpret that and kind of work backwards into the district to get from where we are today to what we think the journey says and means. You know, so, you know, when we get that journey, I would think, you know, you almost have to work backwards and start to, I don't know how, when we get to the end product, I don't actually know how much detail we get underneath it, right? And maybe I should start there, right? Because if we don't get a lot of detail, we probably need to flush out the next level underneath. And make sure that we, you know, define the bullet points, you know, the 3 to 7, you know, bullet points, you know, around, well, what does this actually mean? And then start the process of you know, working it backwards. I don't know. I mean, you asked a really big question.
Yeah.
So,
And this Wednesday, Chris, we should have more, a clearer picture of what we think some of those competencies are gonna be, and a very broad, conversation around definition. But you're right, because how one of those particular competencies looks like for a pre-K student is gonna obviously look different in upper elementary, middle, and high. So
Right.
I absolutely agree, there's gonna be more conversation needed in terms of, you know, what do those competencies really mean, age appropriate throughout our system.
yeah. Yeah, now what does it actually look like?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it becomes, well, how does that compare to today? How do we believe it compares to what we have today, right? And where are the areas that we need to start to make movement? I don't know how to answer your question, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, and these 3 policies particularly look at, they're really focused around district improvement plans, for example, and campus improvement plans. And currently, and we'll talk more about this in the board meeting, when we bring the objectives forward, but currently without a portrait of a graduate or a journey of a graduate, the primary focus of those improvement plans tend to be around performance data, maybe whether we're talking about standardized tests, STAR scores, things like that, but also can include process data. And so journey of a graduate has not been a part of the conversation in developing those plans.
Right.
Once those are developed, we could utilize not just data sets from academic performance, but we could start looking at ways in which we could identify current reality against those competencies, and then how we establish plans to start improving. And it could be in all areas, but it could be, this is just an example, Todd's behind me, hopefully he won't shoot me. But we might get, through our journey of a graduate, we might decide that it informs some of our hiring, our induction and recruitment practices. And so we might see in a district improvement plan, if we feel like it's appropriate, we might see strategies on aligning our recruitment and induction processes to support that journey of a graduate. And so really it's just, opening up the conversation around, do we feel that a journey of a graduate needs to be a part of even that kind of a process, that kind of a decision-making process around improvement plans, for example.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Manuel, I can't, you're all the way on the other side of the room there, so I can't stop you getting ready to talk. So, I think it does, right? I mean, I think there's the ability for us to even create our own district level scorecard that's not necessarily the state metrics, right? Like, again, here are the things that we care about. We've always said outside of the A through F letter grade, there's other things that we care about. And so if we're, true to those things, well, let's talk about those things and measure those things ourselves. And so I do think that has to work backwards into the district improvement plans and well, like the mission and vision, right? You got to start there, and then you got to start working backwards at the campus levels and figure out how we get there. And yes, it may work into human resources, it may work into business operations, it may work into, like, it should work into just about everywhere. It's going to take a long time, but I don't see why we couldn't frame almost everything around it in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
I was gonna ask you a question when Chris was talking. I thought of something. I thought, when I try to brainstorm something, then I ask myself to ask the same question in a different way. So can you ask that question in a different way?
Oh, you're challenging me. Okay, let me see. As we think about, improvement efforts in the district, where, in whatever area, whatever, department maybe, or we're talking about a campus, how would we want the journey of a graduate to inform our improvement efforts?
Just like the standardized test is, right?
Mhm.
Okay. When this concept first, when you guys first brought this concept up, and I started thinking about it, because Matt talks about goals all the time, okay, which is good, because the policies that we establish through the goals is what we're supposed to want to happen here, right? So this journey of a graduate, to include this planning decision-making process, journey of a graduate it's gonna impact everything that we do. From Todd's hiring practices, to how we spend money, and to how we deliver education in the classroom. It's gonna necessarily impact all of that. So why would it impact this particular policy? It has to. How it's going to, I mean, that's, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to impact, but it necessarily has to, right?
Well, and I think that's where the policy committee has a little bit of a voice, is to be able to codify and say, after we get this, we do expect it to be a part of the district improvement plan. And we do expect it to be a part of campus improvement plan. So it's a way to ensure that what is adopted gets carried out in our system. And I think that's where the policy committee, kind of comes into this level, is we get to think about, all right, so what role does policy play in us striving for that graduate profile moving forward? And then taking the decision-making process, these are BWs, is that what they are?
It's
BQA.
BQA, sorry. Taking BQA or BQ and all of these policies and say, how can we best utilize this policy to make the vision that our board has adopted for students in our community is informed? How do we use policies to make that stuff come to life?
When I first read this back here, and I looked at item three, on our agenda, I thought, why are we talking about that? It's the first thing I asked myself.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about BQ? So in your mind, Melinda, why did you bring this up?
So Melinda
Yes.
King,
Yeah.
the journey of a graduate, as we've been talking about, once adopted, really does have the potential to be a real game changer for our students. And where we're not just deepening academic knowledge, but we're also really intentionally and very strategically growing those attributes or competencies that we know students are gonna need, whether they go into the workforce, they go direct to college, they go into the military. And so by it becoming a part of our decision-making process, by us actually looking at, I use the word strategic, how are we strategically and intentionally growing? Let's say communication ends up being one of those competencies. How are we intentionally looking at how we support pre-K students, and how are we giving them learning experiences that grow their ability to be communicators? However we end up defining communication, for example. What does that look like for middle school? What would we really hope that as middle school students make their journey through middle school, that where do we think they need to be and even beyond by the time they're going into high school? And so, for me personally, thinking about it, I think that it touches every aspect of our district if we have a journey of a graduate. And so, wanting to know whether or not it's the board's pleasure and interest to be explicit in local policy, that we believe in it so strongly that it needs to be as prominent in our decision-making about how we improve as a system and build on the greatness that we have here, as well as things like a STAR score or local assessment data, attendance data, things like that.
You know, if we were at a point now where we've had all of our meetings, and then you have an idea of what the community wants and what these talks have generated for you, and you bring to us, say, look, this is the graduate profile that this community wants, then we can start looking at and dissecting these policies and say, wait a minute, this is not conducive for reaching our goals. We're gonna have to change this, we're gonna have to eliminate this, we're gonna have to modify this, we're gonna have to supplement this. I don't know that we can do that until we get to that point when we start looking at these things. But you bringing this up, now I have a better idea of what you're talking about, this EQ. Well, of course, it's gonna have to come into play. How it's gonna come into play, we don't know yet.
I think that's a really good point, Manuel. I think after our last meeting, one of the things that you and I had spoken about is narrowing down to a policy or a set of policies, because if we do this right, the journey of a graduate should impact every part of our system. So in bringing these forward and saying, let's just start with how we make our decisions and how we plan improvement efforts in our school district, and gives us a little bit of time over the next couple of months to read these policies and see, all right, let's take a look at what they currently say. We're hopefully by the end of January, am I right on that timeline, going to bring to the board at the regular board meeting at least a set of competencies to adopt, and say that this is our journey of a graduate, this is what we really want for our kids in our system. And so that next policy committee meeting would be taking those competencies and saying, here's what we've said is a board of trustees, here's what the board has said. Now let's take a look and see how this is carried out in policy. So yeah, this was a really just initial discussion to start to narrow in on a set of policies that we can start making some movement on this spring.
You know, I kind of see it, I see things happen, and I see this thing starting to gel, okay? And I went back and in preparing for today's meeting, I went back and looked at the last presentation you gave us, and I was looking at that one slide that talked about what that one district did up in, is it Virginia?
Henrico,
Yeah.
Henrico County Schools up in Virginia.
And I've had, my youngest is a senior now. Of course, I went to Belton High School, and I had two others that graduated from here. And I thought, how wonderful would it be for me as a parent, and looking at these traits here, you know, if my kids came out creative thinkers, global citizens, communicator, collaborator, critical thinker, I mean, man, those are great things. And I thought, man, this is gonna be an enormous task. But if this can be accomplished, man, just think of how these kids are gonna benefit. It is just fabulous.
Absolutely.
So we'll continue to provide you some policies and things to start to review. I think the recommendation from administration would be to start with their local decision-making policies, and to, if you get a chance over the next month or so, to really read into those and figure out what they currently say. And then when we get to that meeting at the end of January and adopt that board policy or the board approval of that journey of a graduate, then it should trigger some real in-depth movement on some of these policies.
I assume that we're going to have maybe a workshop in one of our meetings where all of this information is put together, and then we as a group can start just discussing it. I mean, is that the plan?
I believe off the top of my head, I do believe we're bringing that to discussion in January
Okay.
at the workshop session.
Right.
But I can't Don't hold me to that, I might be wrong on that one.
No, I mean, if it's not January, I mean, February, whenever it is, I'm just saying, that's the plan in the future,
Yes,
is where we discuss it as a group of 8, we have a discussion about everything that's going on here and what we're doing,
that's right, absolutely.
okay? Did we lose? Chris?
No, I'm still here, so,
Ready?
yeah, we lost video.
Well, I'm glad you both are still here, thank you.
Melinda, anything else that we need to discuss on that?
No, sir, I don't think so.
Matt, anything else?
No, sir, I think we're good. That was a meaty meeting, even though there wasn't a first draft to bring you on anything. There's a lot of work going on, so.
Chris, any other comments?
No, no. No, thank you, I mean, thank you for the ton of work that went into this. So, was research on the, EIC and what the other districts are doing and the thought around, what do we do here with, decision making and what do we do from a facility standpoint. So there's a lot of thought that went into it, so thank you.
Right, and I want to echo that because obviously, Chris and I come in here for a meeting. We may be here an hour or two, but I know that there's a lot more time that goes into preparing for these things, so I appreciate that very much.
Well, one of the things that we're really trying to do, and I hope you feel it, is that when it comes to policy committee, that this isn't about the administration ramming something down your throats and saying this is the way it needs to be. This is about really board and administration working together to create the best policy recommendations for BISD for the future. And so it's a real collaborative effort, and we'll keep trying to spur thought and provide you examples. And I think the way the naming facilities one is kind of is playing out right now is a perfect example of that. We brought you multiple examples. We're bringing you back an initial draft to discuss, and then we'll get to a first reading, hopefully, and land a plane on it. And so hopefully you get a sense of we're really trying to reflect the values that you all have in these policies.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, any issues, concerns for future agenda or administrative reports? Chris, anything? Chris, you still there? Did we lose him?
No, I'm here, I just can't unmute my phone. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay,
Great.
all right, with that said, we'll stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Chris and Dee.